And this vision came to me when I was at Biola. I graduated in 2012, December. And I just knew I had to share it at either chapel or after dark. And it was something that was put on my heart by God. And there was always opportunities to do it, and it just was never working out. And so when they asked me to speak after I graduated, I was like, that's different. Okay, let's do it. So I was really excited because it was something I always felt like I was supposed to do. This story is really hard for me, so if I get emotional, please bear with me. So sometimes things happen to you that you don't expect, and you hear these stories from everyone. You know, a loved one gets cancer, or someone gets into a car accident, and you think, it'll never happen to me though. I do everything right, I do everything good, that stuff will never happen to me. And something like that did happen to me. And I learned through this process that you will be given battles and struggles, and you can either focus on the problem and become the victim, or you can choose to learn from your challenges and learn from the situation that God has placed in front of you. I was fortunate, like all of you, to attend Biola University, and I know this because I was sitting in your seat, and I would hate when speakers would say, you guys are so lucky to go to Biola. And I'd be like, cool, yeah, I know. And like, cool, we get to go to chapel. But it's really great, and just like worshiping with you guys and being back in that presence, like, don't take anything for granted, because being around all people who believe in what you believe in is just such a strong and powerful thing. Like he said, I was a broadcast major, and so I was always focused on doing stories and covering different topics and talking to people and spreading, you know, the word and all that stuff. And someone came up to me once and said, Ashley, you're so focused on changing the world that you're not focused on helping the people that are right in front of you. And that really hit me, because, you know, the people right in front of you are the people that are going to change the world. So I started realizing, you know, between going to Biola, I was so focused on school, interning at all these networks and jobs and everything. But I was dealing with something so much deeper that I kept hiding from everyone. And I just didn't want to tell anyone. And I wanted to brush it off and act like, you know, this isn't really an issue. And just to put on that facade, you know, I'm sure all of us do that on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, right? Like, hashtag, hashtag, I don't know what's happening. I finally, God was like, Ashley, I'm going to get you. You are going to have to address this. And there was a class, and it was called a documentary class in our major. And I was already like completely stacked on credits. And my friend goes, do you want to do this with me? We can tell some stories she wanted to tell. And I was like, okay. And I go to the first class, and I was like, oh, I know what story I'm supposed to tell. And I told my friend, I'm so sorry, I can't tell the story you want to tell. I have to tell my own. And it was a good thing, because both my friends who I was supposed to tell their story with, they ended up dropping the class because it was too hard for them, too much work. So it all worked out. So I really didn't want to have to face this issue. But I finally did, and it was very therapeutic for me, and it really built my relationship with God. And I want to go ahead and share it with you guys, and I hope that you can just have an open heart. And I also want you to keep in mind that I'm not looking for any sympathy or anything, and that God has used me through this obstacle with my family and really worked through my mom, who's actually sick. So I'm excited for you, and just please keep an open mind. And this documentary is called Cold Hands, Warm Heart.
Sometimes it sucks. I'm not going to lie or sugarcoat it. I've slammed doors, hit walls, and thrown things across the room. I've put my hand up just wanting to hit someone. Anyone. No one warned me. There was no guidebook. This is my story. It's called Alzheimer's, and it affects your mind, body, and soul. 1 in 8 older Americans are diagnosed, and 95% of people diagnosed are above 65 years old. That leaves only 5% of people with early onset before they hit senior age. For half of the 5%, it's genetics. For the other half, an unexpected life awaits. It starts with minor memory loss, and as time passes, victims develop problems speaking, recognizing people, and eventually become fully dependent on others mentally and physically. This is life as I now know it, after the diagnosis. She was an independent and sharp woman, always choosing time with us over her work. She would run us to our soccer games and be the loudest mom in the crowd, whether we were winning or losing. She made friends everywhere. PTA, elevators in the doctor's office, everywhere. And she always brought her knitting. She knit for everyone and always gave people fancy scarves and baby blankets. And she loved Barbies. She taught us how to sew her own clothes and made matching ones for my dolls. She was my favorite homework distractor. She would always sneak me and my brother into the movies to see what she would call a double feature. Her tiny hands were always so cold, but she'd always say, "Cold hands, warm heart." Her and my dad were the dynamic duo. They were always so passionate and always dressing up for their little date nights. It was inspiring to see such a strong love. But when Dad was traveling for business, she had to be the mean one. We would throw tantrums and scream out for him. I could see her heart sink when she'd say, "You're gonna miss me someday." I never thought that moment would come so soon. At the time, I didn't understand what was happening. I was a senior in high school when all of a sudden the doctors started talking about the possibility of dementia. She started having problems with her memory, speech, and coordination, and lost her job. We knew something was off but didn't know how bad it would get. A year later, when my parents moved to Seattle, I came home on spring break to a mother who couldn't drive and no longer knitted. I spent the year with them and saw her get worse and worse. She started having problems with her keys, and in just months, she couldn't leave the house by herself. Her words continued to jumble, and it was harder and harder for me to understand. I cried myself to sleep most nights. My dad would spend hours trying to calm me down. I would yell in my prayers, "Why her, God? Why her?" I wanted to blame her even though I knew it wasn't right. She took care of me for 19 years, and now it was my turn. It came sooner than expected. I grew up faster than most, but God had been preparing my heart. 3 years after the diagnosis, by the time we moved to California, Mom could no longer be by herself. And soon, she was fully dependent on me and my dad. There were times when she would wander and try to talk to people, but they didn't have the patience to understand. Most of the time, they would just laugh. I wanted to yell at them, "Have a heart, it's not her fault." She would just respond with a smile and a laugh. I could see it take a beating on my dad, but he tried to never show it. I started to learn that this disease doesn't affect one person, it affects the whole family. And to all of the caregivers out there, you are not alone. Every day is a challenge. Most things make me sad. I want to share my world with her. I want her to know that I love her. A disease does not define a person. Those affected by Alzheimer's are still beautiful people in our world in the fight for their lives. My mom was always the most generous, loving, and selfless woman I had ever met. And although the dynamic of our relationship has changed, she still continues to teach me every day. She's taught me to cherish the moment because it's all we really have, and to love more than I ever knew I could. I now feel a duty to love and a duty to protect. This has taught me that life will throw you curveballs. You can choose to fight, or you can choose to love. You can choose to deny, or he can choose to protect. My mom may have Alzheimer's disease, but when she looks at me with her sparkling eyes, she's not a patient. She's just my mom. And I hear her voice echoing, cold hands, warm heart. Everyone thinks people like my mom don't make sense. But maybe we're the ones who don't make sense. Maybe we're the ones who need to listen.
It's always weird seeing it in front of hundreds of people. So, like I said, this happened when I was 18 years old, and I don't know if you all fully grasp the concept and really things that happen within the disease, but no one could ever tell us what was going wrong. All the doctors would say, you know, it must be aphasia. She started not being able to speak, and a lot of people you might know might have Alzheimer's when they're 90 years old, and they might be saying silly things like, oh, remember that time, Sonny? And you're like, I heard this story 5 times. But it's very different with my mom because it's extremely advanced, and she's extremely young for having it. And she's to the point where you can't really, you can talk to her, but she's not going to respond back the way you think. She might laugh, or she might sing a little song. She likes doing dances and going up to people, going like, and I'm like, oh, sorry, okay. Or she'll start like joining people's conversation and talking to the movie theater. That's always the best. She was like talking to Jennifer Aniston. But I was really upset because I was 19 years old, and my parents said, you can no longer go to Indiana University because your mom's medical bills are too expensive. And at the time, you know, I grew up Catholic, and I didn't really understand what it meant to have a relationship with God. And so I was in a sorority, and I was really upset that I had to leave my school. And when I had to move to Seattle with them and just see her not being able to do things, I was like, Dad, why can't Mom work? Why isn't she working? And I was a person that always had to be in control, and I wanted to have that perfect life. And it was just upsetting to me. I was like, well, if you can't work, then why don't you volunteer somewhere? And you have to understand that no one diagnosed her at this point. They were just saying, you know, we don't really know what's going on. So I was mad. I was like, don't waste your life. Be doing something. And the point where she started fumbling with her keys was the point where I was like, whoa, something is off, and she can't control it. And one day I was so upset, and when I didn't know what was happening, I was like, Mom, how about we sit down and figure out what you want to do every day? And I saw her write, gone store. I was like, wow, she's not writing complete sentences. And that was another time I was like, wow. And you start to learn, you know, this isn't her fault, so stop blaming her. And I was so mad because I was like, I'm 19. If I wanted a child, I would have had a child. And now I have to be a parent to my mom? That's not fair, God. Why are you doing this to me? And I would get so crazy. I would dress in all black, and I would slam my doors, and I would play the fray, You Found Me. You guys ever? Yeah, I was like, you found me! And I was like, what's wrong? I'm like, I'm fine! And yeah, right. I was not fine. Obviously. And I was just like, why did this one have to happen to me? Why did you bring me to Seattle, God? Like, what is going on? And one day, I looked up the City Church, and I don't know if any of y'all are Seattleites, but the City Church is where it's at. And I was just like, I'm just going to go to this church because, I don't know, maybe I'll make friends. And I ended up, I think, getting fully saved at the City Church and really understanding what it was like to have a relationship with God and really understanding the character of God. As it so happened, the people that had gone to Indiana University with me were in Seattle at the time and had introduced me to Biola students in Seattle. And they said, you have to come to Biola. And I just looked it up and I was like, okay, I'm supposed to go. And I knew nothing about Biola. I was just like, okay, I'm supposed to go. And my mom kept getting more and more sick. And so when I went to Biola, I was still in that mindset like, yes, I get to get away from all of this. Like, all right, I get to focus on me. And my dad would always, call in and be like, like it's getting worse and worse. And luckily, my dad wanted to keep at least some of our family together who lived on the West Coast and was able to transfer down here. And so I went to Biola, and it started getting worse and worse. And when I say that, I mean she started having seizures. And seizures for any normal person, you think, okay, they have a seizure and then they wake up and then they're fine. But when you mix seizures with Alzheimer's, it can be deadly. So we started realizing we can't leave mom alone. She can never be alone. And you'd say, okay, why don't you just put her in an assisted living kind of place? She's 52 years old at this point. You're going to put her in an assisted living? And a lot of those places are extremely expensive. So my dad would try to work out of the house, working from his company, and I would get random calls while I was at Biola saying, can you come watch mom? Can you come watch mom? I was like, oh, and sometimes I would even have to leave class to go up to LA to watch my mom. And one day I get a call from my dad, and he was bawling. My dad never cries. He goes, Mom just had a seizure. She's in the hospital. Like, I could tell he was worried that she, was going to die. And I was really, really scared. And I went to the doctor, and luckily, she was okay. And when I say okay, she wasn't dying. But it was at that moment that I was also making this documentary. So putting it all together was really difficult and challenging because I was actually living it. And I was trying to go through those 7 stages of grief. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. It's like anger, frustration, depression, happiness, and hope. And I was like, I just want to skip to the happiness and hope. And that just wasn't happening because I was still really upset. But this is why I encourage you all to take advantage of Biola, because I started really understanding God's character, and I started surrounding myself with people that could educate me on what it was like to have a relationship with God and how I can use that with my mom. And I started realizing as I was doing this project and a research project where I was interviewing families all across Southern California who had this disease, that God is not the creator of evil. And 1 John 1:5 says, God is light, and in him there's no darkness at all. And I was like, wow, God didn't do this? It's not God's fault? And I know some people say, you know what, bad things happen so that you can overcome them. I really don't think that's how it works. I don't think God goes, here's a problem. I just think bad things happen to good people sometimes. Like we learn. We're all falling, and that's just what happens. But God can always use us through it and be a tool of ministry. And that's what was happening with us. Instead of trying to look at my mom and tell her what she should be, I started taking her for who she was. Okay, so I couldn't have in-depth conversations with her about boys or whatever. That probably wouldn't go over well anyway. But I could do other things, and I started to realize, music is a really big thing. And I started to sing songs, and we have this weird little language now where we're able to talk to each other and understand each other, and everyone who sees us is like, you guys are so weird. But, because I'm like, come here, little bear. And it's really weird, I don't even know. But my heart started to change because God started to open my heart and say, this isn't a problem, Ashley. This is a blessing. And my mom is showing me how to love. How to not set standards on people that you think they have to live up to in order for you to love them. My mom doesn't have to speak for me to love her. Just as your parents don't have to speak for you to love them. And it's funny because our generation is so about putting labels on people and so about proving ourselves to each other. Like, especially when you graduate. People are like, what are you doing? What's your job? I'm like, I don't know. Like, do you still love me? I love you. But seriously, and I started to learn, you know, we shouldn't love people based on their jobs. We shouldn't hold other people higher based on what they can do. And we're always striving to be perfect. We look up to these celebrities. We look up to the athletes, the perfect, you know, physicality and the perfect mentality. And I realized my mom doesn't have either of those things. But she's still teaching me every day I'm with her. And every time I get mad at my mom, you know what she'd do? She'd fight back. I'm kidding, she wouldn't. She punched me, no. She would just brush it off, and she'd be like, I'm like, why are you happy? Be mad at me. And I started to realize, why am I holding grudges against all these people when nothing's really bad in my life, really? And my mom's going through so much, and she never holds grudges. Why am I always on my cell phone trying to prove a point or trying to create like a facade when my mom is strictly living in the moment because that's all she has? And that's all of us have, really. We just don't realize it. We just don't see it because we think our lives are going to go on for so long when really Alzheimer's, as you've learned, can hit anyone at any time. As I started to research, I learned so much, and I got to hang out with these families, and there are families where people are getting Alzheimer's at 30 years old. And there's no cause, really. They haven't really found that yet. So I learned, you know, we can't take our days for granted. We can't treat people like they're objects that we just want to soak things out of, because we can get so much out of people who on the outside seem like they have nothing to give. And I just realized, you know, what can we be doing? And I started to see things that my mom could do. And boy, that girl loves to walk. And I don't know if y'all are athletic, but we are in our 18 to 20s, so we should be exercising every day while we can. Use what you can. Yep. She loves to walk. That's one thing that no one will ever take away from her. And I was going to do this walk for Alzheimer's, a 5K. And I was like, you know what, maybe I'll bring my mom. Maybe she'll walk the block. And I bring her, and I have Beyonce, Destiny's Child, you know, I'm a survivor. And I'm like, yeah, survivor. And my mom walked the entire 5K, 3.2 miles. I don't know if you saw her condition, but she's not there mentally. And she can't do many things physically. But she walked 3.2 miles. And everyone that saw her was like, whoa, if I can do that, if she can do that, so can I. Right? We all can do it. And I just started to see, yeah, my mom can't do the ordinary things that moms can do, but she can still do a lot, and she can still love me. I always like to say to her, Mom, you know I love you, right? She'd be like, huh? You know I love you, right? Yeah. Good. And I just want to leave you with a few points. Like someone had told me originally that I was always trying to change the world and not looking around at the people right around me. You're at Biola University. More than likely, there's someone sitting to the left and right of you who care a lot about people. Now's your time to use your ministry and what God has called you to do and who God has called you to serve it with the community around you. When you graduate, you're not going to have those opportunities as easily. And now's the time to do it. So as I was focused on my major and focused on my packages and newsroom, like all my little Eagle Visioners over here, we can focus on using whatever we have to serve others as well. And I want to encourage you to do that. And I want to encourage you to not look past the people sitting to the left and right of you for the huge ministries out there, because those are amazing too. But every one of us has a problem. And more than likely, a lot of us don't want to share it because we're embarrassed. We're embarrassed that we'll get called out on. We're embarrassed that our friends will treat us differently, that they'll say we're sinning, that they'll, just completely abolish us from our friend groups. Seek out those people. Don't be so quick to judge. Because you might be able to help them, and more than likely they'll be able to help you as well. And my second thing that I want you to take away with is that you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to hold everything in and act like you have control over everything. We didn't have control over this, but my mom is one of the biggest tools in ministry that my family now has, and she might not have all the necessary tools to preach to the world, but just her presence is enough. She's more like Jesus than most of the people I know. And a lot of people say, you're so brave, you're so patient. And I'm like, no, I'm not. Hear that 19-year-old that was singing The Fray the other day? Yeah, that still happens sometimes. But the only reason I'm able to get through any of this is because I have the Holy Spirit, which all of you have. So just don't think that you have to take on all this stuff. I was looking up some things and I was seeing, how some people say, God never gives you more than you can handle? And I saw a lot of critics on this on the internet, and they're like, yes, he does. That's a lie. That's not in the Bible. And I started to learn, God may give us more than we can handle, but it's because he wants us to depend on him. Makes perfect sense. We all know that. And this was way more than I could handle. Like I said, I literally was thought I was going to die of depression. And God was like, hey, stop trying to solve this by yourself, Ashley. You know why? Because you can't. You need me. You actually need me. Okay, God. I actually do need you. One of my other points is to stop seeing people for what they can do. Stop seeing them for what strength they have or what job they have. Stop looking at them as an ends to a means. In the entertainment industry, I see that all the time. It's disgusting. I hate it. People only want to talk to people so they can get ahead. Where so many other people can change your minds and change your hearts and have such a bigger effect on you than you even know. And they're probably like the janitor. But you didn't care to talk to them because they were the janitor. Victims of Alzheimer's may not be able to talk like you or everyone else. They may not be able to answer your questions or even acknowledge you. Their communication skills are completely gone, but their spirit's still there. And God calls us to love every single one of his children, people with disabilities included. When you see someone with a disability, I know it's a little awkward because you don't know what to say. You want to look like you care, but you don't know how to care. Find out a way to care. Talk to their families. As I was doing my research, I've been focusing this a lot in my bio career, I guess you could say. And I started to learn that only 5% of those with disabilities are really sought after in our churches to minister to. And a lot of our community think that those people are already accounted for, that God's got them covered. And although God knows what's going on, that doesn't mean we can just ignore them and not acknowledge that they need us too, and that they need our prayers too. We need to learn how to seek after those people. And it's not as hard as you think. As I was talking to these families, one mom, whose daughter was 23 years old, her dad just passed away from Alzheimer's. And her mom goes, you know what's the best? The best is when families just come up to us and bring us dinner and talk to us. Or we go out for dinner. So easy, right? Dinner. You wouldn't think that that'd be your all ministry purpose. They just want someone to talk to. And a lot of these caregivers, there's a statistic saying they die faster than most as well because they're so stressed out all the time, they're juggling things financially, mentally, physically, and they need you too. So just sitting down with the people around you and listening to their story. Get a cup of coffee. It doesn't take much, you know? It really doesn't. And I've learned so much from my mom, and that's to really live in the moment, not get so mad at people, because it's silly. Why are we all so mad all the time? Why are we so quick to anger? Why? I feel like you guys should answer, but it'd be like a million answers. She's not angry at all at anyone. And she really reads the room. She'll bring you happiness without even trying. And it made me really realize that I've been dealing with this for 7 years. And that's a long time. And I started getting scared because it seems like this is all I've ever known. That I don't remember those moments. And I brought some of them up in the documentary, but I'm starting to forget. And the only thing I have right now are my journals. And I know some of you may write and some of you may not. But the main thing I want you guys to leave with is to really appreciate the people around you. Because, especially with all these shootings, shooting in D.C. the other day, we are not guaranteed any days like we think we are. And if we don't really appreciate our time, we're going to regret it. And I know a lot of me did at first. I was so focused on my friends and having fun in high school and college that I wasn't really focused on my family. And now I'm like, what are you doing, Dad? How are you? What's going on? Brandon, how can I pray for you? Like, I love my family. And I'm so glad that through this, our family has gotten so much closer. And I just really want to encourage you to really love on the people around you, to really seek after your family, even if it's hard. Maybe you guys are dealing through something. Your family's always going to be there for you. So just reach out to them. And I want you, if you can, to go home tonight and write a letter to your mom. Your mom especially. Just tell her how much you love her. And tell her some of your memories that you're making at Biola and some of the memories that you made with her as a child. She is going to cry. She is going to call you and send you the biggest package in the mail. I'm not even kidding. So it's more of your benefit than hers. No, I'm kidding. But honestly, because moms have such a special place in my heart now. Dads are awesome and they're the leaders and stuff. But moms embrace you and love you and cook you dinners. And that's just something that you're not going to find often. And like I said, it might be taken away sooner than you think. So I hope you can write a letter to your mom tonight if you feel like it. Don't send her a text. Get that pen out and write her a letter. And just appreciate the people around you. And when you see someone with a disability, I really want you to find a way to embrace them. Because Jesus didn't just acknowledge the people with disabilities, he loved on them and embraced them. He called them each by name and found a way to talk to them and to heal them. And I know we don't have healing powers, but we have a way to reach people and talk to people. And they might not talk back. My mom doesn't talk back. I still tell her about my day. And they love it. They seriously love it. So just don't ignore the people with disabilities in your church or in your school. And try to find a way to seek them out somehow, even if it's a little scary. Everyone has a story, but it's up to you to listen. Thanks for having me.